Welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show with your hosts, Andee Hastings and Mally Shadmehry. Dive into the heart of family law as Andee and Mally bring clarity to legal challenges, celebrate client victories, and share the wisdom of their combined expertise. Get ready for a journey into empowerment and advocacy right here where your story matters.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching. Welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show, where we delve into the heart of family law and the stories that shape our lives. I'm Mally Shadmehry, and joining me is Andrea Hastings, my partner, Andee. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mally. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, just plugging along, family law attorney doing her thing. All right, the question everyone anticipates, Andee. Today, are you a warrior or a diplomat?
Today, I'm definitely a warrior. I have a very special client who's in a very difficult situation and has a lot of attention on her right now. And I want to cloak her in protection. And so it's all of my focus.
Love it. Today, I'm a diplomat. That's rare for me, but it's good for me. You know, when we're in battle mode, like we are prepping for big trial like this, like the one Andee's talking about, I'm serving as her backup. That's what partners do. And that's what Andee does for me when I'm stepping out onto the battlefield. And I enjoy doing that for her as well. So I'm definitely trying to bring a peaceful vibe into the office and keep everybody focused and keep myself focused. But don't get it twisted. There's always that little warrior that's going to peek out when you cross me, honey. So don't do it.
Well, you are doing a great job at keeping everything peaceful, I have to say.
Cool. Tell everybody that wouldn't believe you.
That's why I'm saying it out loud.
I love my Andee. So here we go. We're going to talk about a popular topic. It's becoming more and more heated in the world, and it's 50-50 custody. I had been told by a judge a couple years ago, I'll never forget, he said, it's one of my favorite judges, and he said, you know, I think that 50-50 custody is becoming more and more accepted. I think that we're going to see it happen more and more as legislation changes over the years. You know, a lot of times laws change much more slowly than culture changes. And so sometimes one of the first indicators you're going to see as far as whether the law is going to change in the future is what are you starting to see organically in your cases and your settlements and what these our judges' ideologies are and all these things. And that's one of the reasons we love family law, because we feel like it helps shape our culture. And so on the front lines of, you know, the topic of custody is 50-50 custody. So let's get into it. I want to talk about first just some pros and cons generally to 50-50 custody. So Andee, can you talk to us about what you think some pros would be of 50-50 custody?
Well, I think the biggest pro, honestly, is children having relatively equal access to both of their parents. Both of their parents have a huge hand in shaping their lives, their beliefs, the way that they move about the world. And that is, to me, the biggest pro of 50-50.
Agreed. I've talked about it before. I think that children, when we have two parents that are good parents and highly involved, really benefit from equal access to both parents. It helps their development. And children inherently know I'm half mom and half dad. And having access to both parents in a positive light is going to lead to, hopefully, a more well-balanced adult. So another pro that I've sort of seen happen over the years is that it gives parents a little more balance. You know, you're probably going to be a single parent at first until you get remarried. And we have clients that are not. You already are in a relationship when you enter into the new custody arrangement either way. But it gives a little more balance to parents. You have your children 50% of the time. And as our culture has changed over time, and a lot of times we have two working parents, we are starting to see less and less stay-at-home mothers, fathers. I see both. I've seen stay-at-home dads and moms. Predominantly for older generations, there are stay-at-home moms over dads. But in a lot of the younger generations, when we've got professional women in the workforce, I'm seeing a lot more that I've got moms that are not stay at home. And when you're looking at a custodial arrangement after a divorce, it's something to think about. Are you able to handle keeping your kids most of the time? A lot of our parents, of course, they're ready to do that. But it's nothing to be shameful about. And I've had these conversations with clients, both men and women, like, it's okay if you want 50-50 custody. it doesn't matter. There's no, don't get stuck into what you believe the cultural norm is. What's best for your family is what we can put into place. So that's another pro, is just having a little more balance, time to yourself and things like that. It's just something to think about. And I don't think it should be something that is frowned upon. I think that as human beings and parents, we have to be able to be balanced individuals to provide the best care for children and not be overwhelmed and those sorts of things. So just another pro to think about.
Completely agree.
So what about cons? Can you think of any cons for us?
So one of the big cons is if you have two parents who don't get along very well, who don't communicate very well, and that can lead to a lot of problems. It could put your child or children in the middle of conflict that they should not be in the middle of. Mm-hmm. And it can just create an entire world of problems down the road, not only actually with your ex-spouse, but also with your children. And again, how they move through the world, how they learn to interact with people. So that's one of the biggest cons that I see.
Totally agree. Another one that I can think of, a potential con, is that if you plan to move, it's going to create problems. If you have to be geographically close to one another if you're going to do 50-50 custody as the parents.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that again in a moment, but it potentially could be a con. You're signing up to be geographically close to your ex for the next X amount of years while you're raising your children. So it's just something to think about. You want to stay within a same vicinity. A lot of parenting plans for 50-50 custody include provisions that address that. So it's just something to think about. But Andy's definitely right. The main thing is that, you're going to be co-parenting. You're going to have to co-parent a lot more when you're sharing 50-50 custody for the most part. You both are having equal amounts of times. Issues arise with children all the time. They need to be communicated. And depending on what kind of schedule you go with, you've got to be ready to talk more than just these kind of standard, somebody's got primary physical custody and someone has more like an every other weekend. So, okay. Let's talk about the different scheduling options for 50-50 custody. We get asked that a lot. Like, how does that even work? And it's a valid question. So, Andee, can you tell us what a week on, week off schedule means?
It's exactly what it sounds like. You have a day where you alternate custody. Oftentimes it's Friday at the end of the school day. The non-custodial parent will take custody and have the children through the weekend and the following week until the end of the school day, the following Friday. And so you live your life with your children in a consistent way throughout the course of a week, and they don't bounce around as much. There are pros and cons to all manner of 50-50 custodial arrangements. The biggest pro, I would say, for a week on, week off is just that the kids aren't like bouncing back and forth between homes as frequently.
Yes. The other most common option is a 2-2-3 schedule, which can vary who gets what day, but it's one parent has Monday, Tuesday, one parent has Wednesday, Thursday, and we rotate who has the weekends. People like that one more. That's more common because the children, they're obviously chopped a little bit more, so they're seeing each parent more frequently during the week. Right. It's not such a prolonged period of time between households. And it typically is viewed as better for younger children. The younger a child is, the more frequently they need to have access to both parents, is what a good family law practitioner would tell you. And that's from being taught from many child psychologists and things like that. Maybe we'll have one on as a guest to talk more about it. But yeah, that's what you want to think about with the 2-2-3. Again, there's a lot more coordinating, a lot more back and forth. And, but children are pretty resilient. And from my experience, I've not had many 50-50 custody cases where once you got going and got into a rhythm, kids thrived. Honestly, what about you?
I agree with that. Where I feel like they have not thrived is when the parents are not getting along and they're doing a 50-50 arrangement for reasons other than what really is in the best interests of the children. Okay. And to your point that you made earlier, it is vitally important that parents sharing 50-50 custody live close. And by close, I don't mean, 45 minutes apart.
Yeah.
Because somebody probably lives in, well, somebody does live in the school district. You have to. And the other parent may or may not. And, it's not good for children necessarily to be in the car for 2 hours a day just to get to and from school. Mm-hmm. So those sorts of things, that's why we say that you really need to live close. And if you're in a metropolitan area, you need to be really close, because something that should be 5 minutes away is always 30 minutes at a minimum. So that's where I think parents can really help reduce some of the stress on children, is maintaining a close proximity to one another. It's so important. So if you come see us and you say, hi, I want 50-50 custody of my children, and we ask, well, where do you live, and where does your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, live, and that you say, I live here and it's about an hour away, that's not a good situation for custody. We're going to tell you, if you want to do that, you need to move a lot closer.
Agreed. And that totally gets to this topic, which is, who is a good candidate for 50-50 custody?
Sorry. I think I jumped ahead.
She can do what she wants because her name is on this wall, okay? So she's right. If you want to be a good candidate for 50-50 custody, to get to an efficient conclusion and settle your case, or in the eyes of a court, and some judges are still opposed to 50-50 custody, but I do think it's trending towards being more open. You have to be a good candidate, live within a close proximity of one another. The other most common sort of, there's a couple other things we've hit on, which is you have to be able to co-parent. You are not a candidate for 50-50 custody if you guys can't have genuine conversations about the needs of your children. A lot of times what we see is people saying, I want 50-50 custody. And then during the pendency of the case, we see, they've separated, they're not living together, and they're having to do a dry run, a practice of co-parenting during the case where we're all watching. Lawyers are watching, potentially guardian ad litems, judges, even if you're having a temporary hearing. And what we're seeing is people fighting and, I'm taking the medication with me. You can't have it. Go get your own, instead of working together. And you're proving that you're not co-parenting. You're not a good candidate for 50-50 custody. And the court will see through that. They will say, look, you say you can co-parent. And that's what I see a lot, is that people say, actions speak louder than words. And people say they can co-parent and I can do 50-50 custody. And then we look at the texts, we hear phone calls, we see the Our Family Wizard messages. Our Family Wizard's an app where you can, co-parents can message each other back and forth. Your lawyers can see the messages and things like that. And we look at the evidence and it's just terrible. It's no co-parenting. It's being spiteful. And so the actions are what's going to matter. You have to establish a track record if you really want 50-50 custody of truly being able to do it. A lot of times that really is the line in the sand, that, the thing that tips the scales away from 50-50 custody, because under 1993, the best interest of the child standard here in Georgia, the court can consider parents' ability to co-parent and foster the relationship between the child and the other parent and all those sorts of things. So
I want to say something on that. It just occurred to me while you were talking. Here's the flip side of that. It's hard when you're in a situation, and we encounter this all the time, where you have one parent who is always facilitating the relationship with the children and the other parent, who does not talk about the other parent in a negative light, even though they may feel negative emotions throughout the course of the divorce case, because you're looking out for your child. And the other side is over there constantly blaming you for any problems, negatively talking about you to the children. It's a really tough pill to swallow, but we tell clients all the time, you have to take the high road. And here's a flip side to that. If you want to make it look like y'all can't co-parent, that's not a good tactic. If you make yourself difficult in a divorce case to try to show a guardian or a judge that, see, we can't co-parent because we can't get along, and so I should be primary, be very careful about that, because oftentimes that mentality and the behavior that goes along with it will absolutely backfire.
I am definitely of the mindset that you better bring your genuine, authentic self to the table when you're in litigation, because we're going to see through it anyway. We will pick up on that. I will walk away from you as my client. But I will give tough love and advice and say, oh, honey, I see what you're doing. And we don't do that here. If you want the best results, you better be yourself. And even if that's ugly and you really can't co-parent, cool. Well, we'll get you the right therapy, and you got to work on that. You got a kid who doesn't need to be affected by your negative feelings. So I agree with that. But yeah, those little tactics, just know they're going to get seen. They're going to get heard quickly. And if your lawyer doesn't figure it out, you're going to spend a lot of money. My most expensive cases are cases where people are trying to do their own little tactics, and I'm having to dig them out of it. And I can do it, but that's why I'm not cheap. And so judges will figure it out. Guardians will figure it out. You're not going to get away with it. We see it all day, every day. We specialize in it. So I also would add that in order to be a good candidate for 50-50 custody, you need to have a dependable work schedule. You can't be somebody that travels a lot. You can't be somebody that travels sporadically and, you're just going to let them know later when you're going to travel and we'll rework the schedule every month. It has to be consistent. That's for the children. That's in their best interest, so that they have a consistent schedule and it's based on their needs, not yours as the parent. So it might mean that you've got to look at your career and strongly consider, do I want to keep traveling? If so, I'm probably not going to be a great candidate for 50-50 custody, and I need to swallow that tough pill. But I've had plenty of clients that are able to say, all right, I now have to accept the reality that I'm living in a world where I'm going to be separated from my ex and I've got to co-parent. I'm going to make a career change for my children, and I'm going to have a schedule that keeps me here. So just keep that in mind. Good candidates, then, they don't travel for work, really. They can co-parent. Geographically, you live close to one another. Honestly, the summation is you're just a mature individual, and you can handle, keeping a kind of a business relationship with your ex to parent these children equally. Okay, so kind of the last thing that we always get asked about pertaining to 50-50 custody is child support. Mm-hmm. And I believe that it's a common misconception that if there's 50-50 custody, you don't pay child support. I've seen that as a threat all the time. Somebody saying, usually the breadwinner, well, we're just going to do 50-50 custody and I don't have to pay you any child support. So let's talk about that. Andee, is that true?
No. No, in a word, no, that's not accurate. And we see that a lot. That's another one of the negative tactics that we see folks in contested custody cases raise, or they go for 50-50, not because they really want it, mm-hmm. but because they want to avoid a child support obligation. So what it would be really good for everybody to understand is that's not how it works. Mm-hmm. It has a lot to do with the relative disparities in your income. Mm-hmm. The thought behind the child support calculator is it creates a number that the legislature has determined based on your respective incomes that is needed to support your children. And that's not going to be taken away simply because y'all are sharing 50-50 custody. If one of you makes, $200,000 a year and the other one makes $50,000, then even if you have 50-50 custody, that is likely still a child support case, mm-hmm. because the legislature intends for your children to enjoy a similar lifestyle at each parent's house in the manner that they've determined financially.
Agreed.
So that's a big misconception that we get. And you're right. I completely agree. It's a scare tactic that mm-hmm. people use in litigation to scare the spouse that maybe earns less or isn't earning yet.
Agreed. Now, it's accurate to say that under Georgia law 19615, there could be a couple different scenarios for what the child support arrangement may be that would differ from a custodial arrangement where someone has primary physical custody. Child support is more straightforward when someone has primary physical custody, and the takeaway needs to be for you is that if you have a 50-50 custody case, child support options are a little more variable. For example, it may look like nobody pays monthly child support to one another, but we're going to equally split all of the expenses for the children, or split them 70-30, for example, something. And then you have to really go in your agreement and define, well, what are all the children's expenses? This goes far beyond what we would do in a primary physical custody case. And so what it comes down to is just at the consultation you have with your lawyer, they will go through with that. They will go through all of that with you. They'll get a feel for your finances and what the incomes are looking like, ability to earn looks like, and walk you through different scenarios that may be a little more different than the traditional child support vision that people have. So it's a little more gray, but definitely worth visiting with your lawyer if you think you may be a good candidate. So here's something a little different today. We would like for one of you viewers to message us on our Facebook or Instagram, and I'll give you the where to reach us in just a second, and tell us one thing you learned from today's episode, besides the fact that you learned that me and Andee are just beautiful and you love us. Thank you. Tell us one thing you learned from today's episode, and we will send you some free Hastings Shadmehry merch. We have some really cool stuff, and the first person to message us wins. So get over here. You can find us at Facebook and Instagram at Hastings Shadmehry. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share us, please. We love hearing feedback from everybody, and we want to have more and more of you watching. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon.